Throughout our show, we have toured and talked about some of Cincinnati's best known haunted hotspots. Tonight is another one of those shows. We are joined by artist Tom Miller, who has not only lived next to one of Cincinnati's most haunted hotspots, but also created a comic about the experience, The Screaming Bridge at Maud Hughes Road. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I am your host, Kat Clogo, and tonight with me in the shadows are Christina Wald and Jen Kohler. And also, you can follow us on social media at Sin Cabinet of Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram. And as always, please share your local hometown haunts, creepy cryptids, and other interesting weird history about your hometown. You can share that with us at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. We are an official podcast that can be heard on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and SoundCloud. We know a lot of you like us on SoundCloud. Thank you so much. Find us by searching Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, and please rate and review us there so other spooky and weird history lovers just like you can find us. There's a link in the show notes. All right, a little bit about our guest tonight. Tom Miller is a professional illustrator who started his career at Ohio Magazine as an assistant art director. This is when Larry Flynt owned it and they shared an office space with Hustler Magazine. There must be lots of interesting stories from that.
Oh, yeah.
He has spent years contributing to games, video, card, and RPG art. He's also does concept art for various local agencies and teams up with his brother, illustrator Ron Miller, on various projects too. Tom also did the cover art for the first issue of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities comics anthology in 2020. For fun, he collects Alebrijes and Lucky Cats, Maneki Neko, and he also has a goofy 4-year-old standard poodle named Cosmo. All of his web and social media links can be found in the show notes. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. So we're tackling one of Cincinnati's best known urban legends. I almost want to say it's the king of urban legends around here. But before we dig into Maud Hughes Road and its Screaming Bridge, I want to know a little bit more about you and what brought you into the world of art and also into the world of the strange and spooky.
Okay. Well, as far as bringing me into the world of art, I mentioned that my brother is an illustrator. So he went to art school before me. And much to my parents' chagrin was the day I came and said, guess what I want to do? I want to go to art school too.
Oh.
And so sort of followed right behind him. He graduated the year I went into school. And I found some pictures the other day that my mom, who had passed away, had kept all these things from us. I found a drawing from second grade of rocket ships and spacemen and Mars and things, and a grade card that said, I need to pay better attention in classes other than art. So I guess it was just it was meant to be for both of us, I guess.
Yeah.
But we actually have, it's sort of a family thing because I have a cousin who's a graphic artist, an uncle who's an architect, and another uncle who's a graphic designer too. So it sort of runs through the family a bit.
Oh, that must make for fun family reunions, being able to
Yeah,
talk about what you're all into.
sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's just my extended family are all scientists. So
okay.
like chemical, like not chemical, but food chemical engineers or 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 weather scientists for NOAA or
Wow.
geophysicists and all these. And I'm like, I draw comics. So
Well, somebody's got
yeah,
to do it.
somebody's
And
got to
obviously
do
it's
it. But I
you.
like how you have all the artists together so you could just share and geek out about stuff. And you have done a lot of stuff. I do have to note, I read through the long biography you sent us. And as a Sims player, a very dedicated Sims player, I do like the fact that you worked on busting out for Sims.
That was fun to do. Because I had worked for a video game company here in Cincinnati. That I was there for exactly three years to the day before we got shut down. And when they closed them down, the fellow who owned it, St. John Bain, he went out to California to work at Maxis. And
Hmm.
about a year later, my wife took a job where she had to move a chemical plant from Las Vegas to Fresno and build the new plant. So,
Hmm.
of course, we all went along. And when he found out I was out there, he wanted to know if I'd be interested in, working, on the Maxis Sims game. So I would commute on Sunday night up to Walnut Creek outside San Francisco, and then on Friday night drive back to Fresno for the weekend. Um, but it was an interesting experience. I mean, it's like going from a very small game company here in town to
Hmm.
Maxis, which was the entire floor. We were like a fairly compact team on Bustin' Out. We probably had like 3 or 4 artists and maybe a whole team of 20 people. And there were about 120 people working upstairs on Sim City,
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, but it was kind of like working on a movie. They would about 5 or 6 o'clock, they would come around and ask you what you wanted for dinner, and they would bring dinner in, which sounds very luxurious, but of course, it really just meant you didn't have to leave your desk and you could
Hmm.
keep on doing art. So, but it
Hmm.
was a lot of fun. My kids got a kick out of it. Being able to play the game, and I made an avatar of me in the
Oh,
game, so
yeah.
they had like a favorite shirt I had. I made the texture and some of them glasses and a beard.
Huh.
And much to a little bit of annoyance, one day I found one of them playing Bustin' Out, and they had me kind of walking and bumping into a corner in the room. So
Oh,
it's like, hey,
oh,
yeah,
that's
but it was a
really,
lot of fun though.
that is. And I know from the Sims community, busting out is looked at with a lot of very positive nostalgia.
Oh, cool.
And there's actually a campaign going on to bring back a lot of the items from that pack
Oh, that's
into Sims
funny.
4. So we were actually just talking about that in the Sims community this weekend. We're like,
Oh, how
what would you
nifty.
want to bring back? And busting out stuff was a lot of the recommended. So
Oh, that's
when I
very
saw
cool.
that, I keyed in on that, but I know Christina probably keyed in a lot on you being a creative detector. Creative
A
detector.
creative detector. Like, there it is.
That's a
It's
new
right there.
role.
I
Creative
detected that.
director. I detect creativity from you. Um, for was it Raw Protha miniatures?
Valpartha.
And yeah, and you did a bunch of game and magazine art.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
I
know a
did a cover.
lot, yeah, I know a lot of our listeners would be interested how you landed a job doing game art.
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I actually don't even really remember. We had just moved uh, in a tortuous kind of way. My wife actually had a 4-year scholarship in creative writing at Ohio University. This really
Okay.
does relate. By the way, did you ever watch The Queen's Gambit?
I did.
Okay, well, the guy who wrote that, Walter Tevis, he also wrote The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie.
Hmm.
But he was one of my wife's teachers at Ohio University.
Oh, wow. Small
Yeah,
world.
so that was kind of cool. But
Yeah.
she, on the other hand, she's a really good writer, but she did not um, have the she had to have the muse speak to her, and
Hmm.
it's like, and sometimes she can be very fickle. And so she actually went back to school and was going to get her master's in technical writing instead. But 4.5 years later, and 2 children, she had her degree in industrial systems engineering instead.
Wow.
Yeah, go figure.
Wow.
Surprised everybody.
That seems like
But
quite a
that, but
switch.
it was. So that was at OSU, but then GE moved us to Cincinnati in
Okay.
1988. So that's how I ended up here. And I have really no notion, quite frankly, of how in my memory, how I found out about Ralpartha. They were a tiny little business right behind the old Cincinnati Gardens.
Hmm.
There's the paint plant down there. They used to come over all the time and give us free car washes because of the detritus that would fall from the sky on our cars.
Right.
And right next to us was a metal plating company. So we had heavy metals on one side and paint production behind us.
Oh.
And in the meantime, the air would smell like cherry and peach because of the flavor company, which ironically, my wife is the director for North and South America for that company now for hazardous materials.
Oh,
So
wow.
it kind of all swirls together. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it
I really don't
does.
know how I got in there. But it was fun because we were doing like BattleTech type things, and all the AD&D figures were being done by us. So it gave me the opportunity. I was able to do, I didn't do a dragon cover, I did a dungeon cover for Dungeon Magazine.
Okay.
That I asked my sister-in-law if she would mind posing as a witch in front of a skeletal dragon. And she,
Oh,
yeah, sure, no problem.
yeah.
So I ended up giving her the painting. So she
Oh,
had the painting, but there's all sorts of weird things here. About 2 years ago, I got contacted by somebody wanting to know if I still had that painting or not, and they wanted to buy it. And so
oh.
I gave my sister-in-law the option. I said, if you want to sell it, it's up to you. I don't have it in my house anyway. She goes, yeah, sure, I'll sell it. So this guy from California said, I'll give you $2,000 for the cover. And I said, sounds good. I asked Laura if that was enough. She said, sure. And then the guy sent me a check for $3,000. I have no idea why, but so she got her 2,000 and I had $1,000 handler's fee.
I guess
So
so. Just
yeah,
really enthused that he got that. I mean,
yeah. I have no idea how he tracked me down or why he wanted that particular painting. I mean, I liked it, but
mhm.
I can't believe like 20 or 30 years after I did it that somebody was take the time to look for it.
Well,
But
so much of this stuff now is done digitally. And I,
yeah,
I say this as a digital artist, I work almost completely digitally. So getting that handmade cover that's hand
yeah, I guess
painted is
so.
really special now.
Yeah, and it was big too. I mean, it was
Yeah.
about, probably about 2.5 feet by, 2 feet wide. So it was a good sized painting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the thing is, I don't know if he'll ever. The dragon was supposed to be scratching runes in the rock, and all the runes on the rock are my kids' names and my wife's name and everything on the rocks. So I don't know if you'll ever translate and go, why was the dragon scratching Barb and Zach and Ben into the rocks? It's like, I don't know.
It's a fun little Easter egg.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of
Yeah.
like when I was working in the video game company in Cincinnati, when we were doing Return to Krondor, there was a path you could take, sort of the Easter egg path. And we had recently, my family, Barb and the kids and I had been at Blackwater Falls over in West Virginia. And I had a great picture of the four kids sitting on this rock together. And if you go down this one path, you go by this big rock, and there's my four kids sitting on the rock in the game Return to Krondor. So yeah, it's fun to leave that stuff around.
Yeah.
So,
I know people who
but
play games like me love finding little Easter eggs like that. It gives it some little personalization
yeah.
that you don't usually like. Most players may just kind of go, "huh," but others like appreciate that. I
Yeah.
mean, geez, Ready Player One, that entire
Oh,
book is
sure.
about that. So, um, yeah, it is a big thing in nerd culture, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean,
so,
that was kind of funny during that time at Ralph Parth. It was when I was also doing the BattleTech stuff. And that's where
uh-huh.
Christina and I had this weird interconnection because I had actually designed some mechs for the BattleTech game. And years later, when she and I finally met, she had done some artwork based on mechs that I had designed,
Oh,
you know.
wow.
Yeah, so just weird. It's Cincinnati. We told people when we lived in California, uh, that California was the biggest small town that we'd ever lived in. Because everywhere else, if you do the whole Kevin Bacon thing, it's like 6 degrees of separation. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
1.37 in Cincinnati. It's just, I mean, it's just kind of crazy. I mean, a perfect example was when I was working at another agency, and we had a freelancer come in who was a video editor. And when he did, we were talking the first day. We were doing stuff for Ethicon, so all this medical surgery stuff, and we're talking about the thing. And then, of course, we're just doing the work, so we're just chatting, and we start talking about family. And I asked Rick, I said, "Oh, what does your wife do?" He goes, "Oh, she just works for this little company in Blue Ash." I said, "Well, what kind?" "Oh, it's a chemical company." I said, "Wow, my wife works at a chemical company too." I said, "Really? In Blue Ash?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's called Michelman." I said, "My wife works at Michelman."
Ah,
"What department is your wife in?" "Oh, it's the environmental department." My wife was his wife's boss. It's like, I mean, really, it's like, what the
wow.
hell?
Yeah, that
But
really
it's
is
but
too
but it's
close.
but that's so Cincinnati, you
Yeah,
know?
it is. Yeah, we find little ties about that. A fun thing is my neighbor who works in like accounting at one of the larger companies around here
Hmm.
somehow knows Kevin Necessary. And I just brought up, I think I was talking about editing the comic anthology for this year and talk about Kevin's work. And he's like, "Oh, I know Kevin." I'm like, "How do you know Kevin?" But yeah, they've run into each other, and I think Kevin must have done something for their company at one point and met
Yeah,
and
I
they
think Kevin and I have some sort of bizarre sort of thing, like I don't know, with like ley lines or something, but ours appears to meet at Lucius Q. Because the last two times we've run into each other has either been outside Lucius Q or in Lucius Q. I just saw him about 3 weekends ago when they had the big thing with the big wheels going down into the straw and on.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that just seems to be a spot that we're apparently just drawn to be, to see each other. So go
Yeah.
figure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of ley lines and other spooky things, do you have an interest in the paranormal?
Well, I do. I mean, I've only had probably, I've actually seen more, and when I say UFOs, I mean that in the literal sense of truly unidentified flying objects. I don't think that they were, alien visitors, but they were certainly something that, I found inexplicable, within for an easy explanation. But in terms of more of a supernatural, probably the weirdest thing that ever happened was when my father-in-law passed away several years ago. I was up there the day before he passed away, and at one point, my wife and her sister, I was giving them a break and sitting with them, and he sat up all of a sudden and grabbed my hand and said, the experiment was a terrible failure. We have to tell everybody and warn them." And then he laid back down. And I'm like, "Norm, what experiment?"
What?
Yeah. And to this day, I mean, he never brought it up again, and he passed away the next day. So he took that secret to his grave. So unless we get a Ouija board out and maybe try to find out what he was talking about, yeah, it's like, what the what? But then about exactly a year later, he had a computer that he was not very proficient with. And so all of us always would help him on things. But when he had passed away, we, had his list of friends on there. So we sent out the note that he had passed away, and we were having a memorial service. And then my son, he ended up getting the computer. And the next year, I woke up at about 4 in the morning for some reason and noticed that there was a text message from his computer that was to the day that he died. And it was
Whoa.
sent out at 3 in the morning, which is about the time he passed away, that sent out the message that he had passed away, and it went out on the mailing list to all the family and friends. And I asked my son about it because he's in IT, and he goes, I thought I had that thing wiped, but even so, I wasn't up at 3 o'clock in the morning to send that. Um, you know, my
Oh,
wife's like,
wow.
well, dad just wanted to say hi, so
Wow.
yeah, so it's pretty weird.
That that's that's a those are two very good stories.
Yeah,
Thank you for
pretty
sharing
pretty
those.
odd. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, the other one I have is actually probably falls more in the under the sort of St. Paul on the road, to Damascus when he
Hmm.
gets struck, because we had a very, very close friend who passed away a few years ago that I knew back in when we lived in the state of Delaware. And we used to sit up like till 3, 4, 5 in the morning talking, and there was a whole group of science fiction fans that hung out at his house. He wrote several books. In fact, my wife worked as an agent for him for a while, and he had this whole series of books about Samurai Cat that were just hilarious books. And but Kate, his wife, had her PhD in medieval philosophy from
Oh.
Notre Dame, which you talk about
Oh.
very niche sort of thing. But she taught at the University of Delaware, and philosophy, ethics, and that sort of thing. But we were very, very close. He's my oldest son's godparents, and we're their youngest son's godparents. And consequently, a lot of discussion would tend a lot of time there because of the science fiction fandom, sometimes being more skeptical on things, would turn around to religion. At that point, we had not had kids yet. It really wasn't much of an issue for us. But Kate and Mark, very, very, very serious Catholics. And my wife was cradle Catholic, but sort of like, well, whatever. Um, so several years later, we'd moved back to Ohio. And in fact, in what the book that my wife sold for him, his first book, it gave a whole list of people, dedicated to, and I was in the list at the very end. The last paragraph is, leave Tom Miller out because he moved back to Ohio. So, but we would talk to each other, 4 or 5 in the morning because we know we'd be up painting. So at the time, of course, there was more questioning when you have a kid about, what is your role in the world, and faith and things like that. And one night, I was having this very vivid dream, um, back at Mark and Kate's house back in Newark, Delaware, and we're talking about God, and we're going around and around and around, kind of like keep just, doing all these, circular arguments. And finally, I just said, "Look, Mark, let's just cut to the chase. Is there a God?" And he said, "Yes, there is a God. Not his voice. I heard it and it woke me up and I sat up in bed."
Woohoo!
Yeah. And later that year, I enrolled in an RCIA program. That was 36 years ago and still Catholic. So it took.
Yeah. Wow. It's
Yeah.
yeah, spirit speaks to the strangest places. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
Yeah. So there was that. But
Yeah.
otherwise, most of the other things have been odd visual sightings and things like
Hmm.
that. Out one night with a friend back when we lived up in Columbus, and we're walking. I had an Irish wolfhound at the time, and we had her out walking,
Ooh.
and she was, out in this field, and I look up, and there are like this little V of white blobs going over us, kind of pale, uh, look like they were lit maybe from underneath.
Hmm.
Probably might have been geese, but on the other hand, I've never seen geese flying at night. When they fly, we used to be on a flightway when we lived out east, and they honk, especially at night. It
Yeah.
was just this silent blob of V's that glided over us and disappeared into the haze. Ow.
Wow. That's just
Yeah,
spooky.
yeah, yeah. That was kind of weird. Um, and the other, when we were still out in California, we had an exchange student staying with us for a couple of days, and they had gone into the local either Vons or Ralph's or something, and looked up, and there was just like a little white dot in the sky, and thought, during the day, if you know where to look, if it's really clear, there you can see some stars during the day if you know where to look.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, it could be that, but it's awfully more not like lit white, but not lit, not a light source.
Hmm.
And so thought, okay, well, if it's something up there, I rested my head against, they had a roll bar on our Forerunner, because, if you're looking, you can see something moving in the sky once the Earth is turning. And whatever this was just hovering. It just stayed there. And even when my wife came out, I said, take a look at this. She saw it. So whatever was there was just hanging up in the sky, to the point where you could tell that there was a volume to the object, but not certainly anything of like what it might be.
Hmm.
Now, we were near Vandenberg Air Force, not Vandenberg, but oh gosh, no, Vandenberg's the missile one, the one's up in the high desert where they occasionally would land the shuttle,
Yeah.
Edwards Air Force Base. And shortly after that, they had said that they did an autonomous UAV drone flight from Edwards to Australia. And with these things, they can put them up there and they can like control themselves and pretty much can hover in one spot.
Hmm.
So, and people think of a drone and they think, it's got these little drones and things. The drones that they fly, like in Afghanistan and things like that, are about the size of a World War II B-25.
Hmm.
I mean, they're big.
Yeah, they are.
So, yeah. So I don't know whether we saw a drone practicing out of Edwards, but, like 3 or 4 of us saw it, and, I don't know.
Yeah. That's a really good point because I don't know when drone technology was really developed. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
something we can actually look up now,
yeah,
but they would explain a whole lot of UFOs that people around Air Force bases have seen.
yeah, it
Um,
would. And we have
Even
a
like the
friend who,
V-shaped one that you were talking about.
sure.
easily
Yeah,
could be
we have
replicated by
we
drones.
yeah, we have a friend who's a Navy F-18 pilot, and he was. I was asking about all this flurry of naval, videos and things, and he goes, "Yeah, we just keep seeing some weird shit out there.
Hmm.
It's my brother was kind of very skeptical. He goes, why is it, everybody can get these clear shots and all these things from the military are fuzzy? But I had to explain to him that they're they're getting different kind of data. It's the FLIR data, the forward looking infrared, and it's
Hmm.
not meant for clarity. You're getting other information and data from it. But yeah, there's just some weird stuff going out there, and it's just very peculiar. The military is like really big on, yeah, we don't know what this is, so
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
So
I've not seen a UFO. Um, I participated in something that was reported as a UFO once,
oh, cool.
but my
Okay.
husband has seen a UFO out
That's
near
neat.
Grissom Air Force Base. So, and I know him, and if he said he saw one, I think he did. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I mean, I have a friend who's a skeptic, like a professional skeptic, practically another artist.
Hmm.
And it's kind of funny because, I think there, people, I also have another friend, they're both video editors. And this other video editor, I mean, honest to God, believes that the moon is an artificial construct and that there are 200 million people living on Mars at this time right now. And that, I mean, and it kind of goes on and on from there. I even to the point where I was finding the most obscure conspiracy theories just to see if I could, it became a game to see if I could find one that did not fit into his complex, torturous worldview. And
Right.
they all kind of like somehow Tetris themselves together in some odd fashion. Um, but the other guy is almost, I don't want to say as bad, but he's so far at the other spectrum in his skepticism that it's no more sound in its reasoning than the person who believes everything is the person who believes
Hmm.
nothing. Because I had told him about one other one. We actually had a drive-in in California, just these two red dots separate from each other that just went over us. No strobe light, no rotating beacon, no navigation lights, no red on one side, green on the other, all the other things that you have on aircraft. And we'd taken the kids, I think, to see cats and dogs. And my wife and I watched these two red lights just go over silently and disappear into the north of Fresno. And he goes, "Oh, they were flares." I went, "No, no, they were not." He goes, "Well, how do you know?" And so, when you have that kind of argument, it isn't even an argument, but it's just like you could have maybe said some things and go, "Was it this?" But he goes, but his fallback back was, "Well, it's flares." And
Right.
no, it wasn't flares. I don't know what it was. I don't know if that made him happy, me saying, no, I really don't think it was aliens, but I do not know what the hell it was either. But
Hmm.
it was something, definitely out of the ordinary. My mom and dad were both pilots. So I spent a
Hmm.
whole lot of my childhood at airports. And even he was a lieutenant in the Civil Air Patrol, so around military aircraft. And whatever
Hmm.
this was, it was not normal. It was definitely something odd, so. But yeah, so it's funny having either end of that, where believing everything and believing nothing.
Yeah.
I think you just have to have somewhat of an open mind, about these sort of things.
Yeah.
You know,
Constantly be learning and having a healthy wanting to question origins of
yeah,
things is also
yeah,
good. But
because
yeah,
because
like you said, you can go too far one or the other.
yeah, I mean, because my brother and I kind of get into this. We like, even though we do the same kind of art and work together, there are several things that we are diverge apart on. And one of them was, like the scientific method, it's all about repeatability. You
Hmm.
have to be able to have an experiment and it needs to repeat itself so you can get meaningful data and then find out why it's happening. And it's an incredibly important method to help us explain what's going around us. I said, but I asked someone, he said, what do you do with a singular event? It's
Hmm.
non-repeatable. It just is what it is. And he goes,
Hmm.
well, then it's probably not worth thinking about. I went, well, wait a minute. That seems a
And
little.
And the
a
thing that
little,
always drives me a little nuts about the scientific method is that that's for hard sciences like math
yeah,
and chemistry and astronomy. It doesn't account for the soft sciences, the
sure.
humanities, cultural
Yep,
anthropology, sociology, and psychology.
yep.
And and those we're still teasing things out of. And
Oh, Lord, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
so linguistics too, like there's that linguistics is my background, and you can have
Oh, okay.
singularities and have like strange little one-off words that get developed and dropped really quickly. Slang is
Sure.
like that. Like you may have it used for a hot minute and then it's dropped and no one ever repeats it again. So, and there are anthropologists and linguists that will study that. And but yeah, that's really hard to repeat, and especially with folklore, a lot of it are really old folklore that we've managed to collect. Has all been oral tradition that
Yep.
also gets exaggerated on with every retelling, and small little details get dropped.
Oh,
And
it's like
also,
cultural telephone.
it is, and it's great when you take little segments. Like I love looking at old studies of urban legends from the 1960s and 70s, back when they really were just starting to collect all these stories as pop
Right.
folklore, basically, and seeing how we still have the same skeletons, basically, of stories,
Right.
but the backgrounds and the characters, although the characters will largely be the same because you're dealing with a motif, they do change. It's like the hero's journey,
Sure. Right.
basically.
Exactly.
Like, so King Arthur and Han or Luke Skywalker did the same journey. It's
Yeah.
that. So that was my small little soapbox about the
Yeah. No, I
scientific
mean, there's
method.
certain things that the human condition is always going to be, important, but always not necessarily explainable
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah. And that's what makes great science fiction and fantasy, because we get to delve into those on our talk about urban legends and how stories change. We want to highlight the Screaming Bridge at Maud Hughes Road, which is one of the king urban legends here in Cincinnati. And before we bring Tom back on to talk about his experiences with the Screaming Bridge, I wanted to give our listeners a little bit of the history of the Screaming Bridge and why it has such a key part of Cincinnati folklore. So, sources for this portion of tonight's show is the Journal News of Hamilton, Ohio, the Union Library Journal of Hamilton, Ohio, James Willis's strangeandspookyworld.com, the Historic Bridge Foundation, the Cincinnati Enquirer, and of course, everyone's favorite, Creepy Cincinnati. Thank you. So, nestled within the hills of Liberty Township is Maud Hughes Road and its bridge across a train track, a vehicle bridge that spans over the Norfolk and Southern rail line that runs through Butler County. Originally, the first bridge was built in 1911 and it was rehabilitated again in 1991. Originally, it spanned 111.9 feet with a deck width of 24 feet. In 2014, crews fixed the sharp S curves that led up to either side of the bridge, in addition to replacing the bridge altogether. The new bridge is a single span concrete I girder bridge compared to the former beam bridge. You can reach the bridge at around the 6300 block of Maud Hughes Road in Liberty Township. However, locally, the bridge is known as the Screaming Bridge and is one of the many crybaby bridges that are dotted around the state of Ohio. Known to No one knows when the bridge got the Screaming Bridge nickname. One theory is that the original bridge was grooved in such a way that caused a screaming sound as you drove over it. There are many legends tied to the bridge, of course, ranging from engine explosions to phantom mothers throwing their infants off the bridge. If you're hearing a spooky sound of a toddler, that is in fact my actual real toddler. We'll go we'll go through some of the stories here, but they'll have one thing in common: hearing someone screaming at the bridge. According to one story, which reads like this, a typical crybaby bridge story, a young woman walked onto the bridge and threw her baby over the side, killing it. It is said that if you drive over the bridge, in addition to hearing the mother's ghost screaming out In anger and sadness over what she did, you will also hear the cries of a small baby coming from under the bridge. This is from James Willis's Strange and Spooky World website. He actually has a crybaby bridge project going on right now. If you have your own crybaby bridge in Ohio, you can submit it and look over at James Willis's website and see it's already submitted. But you can also put your story in as well. He actually talked about it on episode 10 of this very podcast. The interesting thing that James did note is that this crybaby bridge motif is a very new addition to the repertoire of haunted legends of the Screaming Bridge. One of the best known stories is, of course, the Phantom Train. One of the earliest tragedies linked to the bridge goes back to a railroad accident in which two men were scalded to death on their locomotive while they were going between Westchester and Gano. However, the accident was in Westchester Township, formerly Union Township. The Maud Hughes Bridge is in Liberty Township, yet somehow the accident became attributed to this area. In 1909, an accident killed 2 engineers and injured 3 others aboard a train on October 24th. One of the engineers was killed off duty, hitching a ride back home to Middletown, where the steam locomotive exploded. It could be a scream locomotive too, who knows, where it is now. It had been fully loaded with water when it left Ivorydale in Cincinnati, but after about 11 miles out, a leak had drained most of it, causing the explosion. That accident wasn't the only tragedy along this stretch of track. On June 7th, 1976, at Princeton Road overpass in Liberty Township, a Penn Central employee was killed when 2 rails protruding from a southbound work train penetrated the cab of the northbound locomotive he was on. The overpass is the next bridge south from Maud Hughes Road Bridge, only half a mile south on the same train line. The engineer who died was James E. Finley. He was 42 at the time. As it was written in the Journal News, Finley was killed instantly. He died of injuries suffered when the train on which he was working was rammed by the rails of the track being hauled on the passing train. The 2-engine Penn Central train was headed north when it passed a southbound work train carrying the rails of the track. The rails struck the northbound Penn Central train, 2 rails ramming into the control cab of the first engine and 1 driven into the generator of the second engine. The rail entering the control cab killed Finley and injured the train brakeman and firemen, Terry Hillard and Kenneth Loshef. Hillard and Loshef were treated and released from the hospital. The 2-engine Penn Central train continued moving for another 300 feet after being rammed with the track rails. A flagman and a conductor were uninjured by the accident. If it went up another 300 feet, that means that it was closer to the Maud Hughes Road Bridge. So, there are many, many stories talking about a phantom train, and here's one of them. One wrote, "I was there when a train passed under the bridge right around midnight. Me and like 4 other people on the train is going under the bridge, and we all see small orbs floating along the sides of the train. There had to be 20 or 30 of them just floating like bugs, but they were orbs for sure. After the train passed, we all noticed that in the distance, a large orb floating along the tracks. The orb continued to float closer to the bridge, and when it was about 50 feet off, it stopped, morphed into a humanoid-like blob, and drifted into the woods to the side of the tracks. 100% true story. Cannot explain it to this day. Everyone there seen exactly the same thing as me." Another report writes, "Someone else reported seeing a phantom steam train approaching the bridge, even seeing its bell ringing on the locomotive and feeling the heat from the steam drifting off the engine as it passed under the bridge. As soon as it passed the bridge, it disappeared." Besides the phantom train, we also have a reported 36 murders and suicides are said to have happened off the bridge. That's a lot. That's a lot. Witnesses have reported seeing hooded figures, shadow figures, mists, apparitions, and phantom lights along the bridge and the train tracks. The legend reportedly has been around since the 1960s and spread through the local high schools, according to some sources. These are in the comment sections of a lot of these online newspapers that I found. You can also see a phantom female walking along the bridge on a full moon, and she is the one that actually has been reported since the 60s. A ghost of a woman hanging from the bridge has also been reportedly seen. Another story goes, a couple was walking over the bridge while arguing. The man pushed the lady over and she fell to her death. Strange orbs have been seen floating along the tracks, as reported earlier. One person claims to have heard a scream before witnessing an apparition of a woman in a white dress walking along the railroad tracks below the bridge. Another urban legend is a man and a woman whose car had stalled on the bridge. The man got out to look for it, and when he came back, he couldn't find his girlfriend who had been left in the car, but her purse was still there. The man looks around the car, looks down the road on either side, trying to figure out where she is, but then can hear a familiar creak sound, looks down, and his girlfriend has hung herself off of the bridge. This is a very common urban legends motif. Also, speaking of common urban legends motifs, if you stop your car and flash your headlights 3 times, an Axeman will come out of the woods and attack you. Somebody had claimed on one of the random forums that I read that not only did the Axeman come out of the woods, but then leaned up on the back of the car and then disappeared. Urban legends, everyone. We're going to keep topping these urban legends. I can see Tom's laughing on the video screen. A fatal accident with a bus load of children. Sorry. A fatal accident with a busload of children when a driver lost control of the bus and the accident killed all on board. Now it is reported that when you cross the bridge, you can hear the screams of the children dying. Nuns and puppies next. No, thankfully we never get there. I am sorry, everyone, that I am laughing, but the stories just get more and more exaggerated as we go on. Drivers who pass over the bridge on old Maud Hughes Road report hearing the screams of a girl who is believed to have killed herself by jumping from her boyfriend's cart. Now I'm just repeating that, just edit that bit out. So those are some of the very great, we gotta just end on the child school bus thing. Those are some of the great stories coming from Maud Hughes Road. It seems to have been a major hangout back in the 60s and 70s to hang out underneath that bridge with your teen friends, probably smoking and drinking. And with that, Christina, Jen, and Tom, let's come back and discuss Maud Hughes Road and its Screaming Bridge. I don't know, but that was a wild ride.
I'm here. I just I was working on my Cintiq, so I had to like reek about it. And by the way, Tom, if you're wondering, we do editing. So
yeah,
this will be lightly edited. Yeah, so we edit.
Yeah,
if
you notice I took a lot of pauses when I would just lose.
I don't know. I think raw. That's pretty priceless.
I like the nuns and kitties though. That we were that close to having nuns and kitties participate, or nuns and puppies participate in this. I love just like the portal to hell that Christina you talked about in the first book. Mm-hmm. This one almost is equal to, maybe inches above, the ridiculousness of urban legends. It's like, when I was reading through this and putting it together as a dossier, I'm just like, this is a bunch of middle schoolers trying to one-up each other on stories they've heard about Maud Hughes Road.
It does sound that way.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for hanging in on with that list. So, Tom, great. You used to live in the area, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And we walked along the tracks there. You know, I mean, there certainly are a lot of beer cans and teenage detritus, as it were. No bodies, but certainly like a teenage spore left behind.
Yeah.
You know, sort of like deer scat, but beer cans.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Well, Jen, you had that experience with that abandoned mattress and couch, so at a different location.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are the locals thinking?
Worried about that area.
Well, I mean, it was actually. I mean, we lived in Dutchland Woods, which we backed up to oh God, I can't think of the name of the road, but it's the one you turn off of and go right to the bridge, ran behind our house. So the tracks were literally, I mean, when we were on our back deck, we could see the trains going by. And certainly at night, I mean, the closest crossing, I believe, was Tylersville Road, because after that, there were all overpasses over the highways and things like that, or underpasses in the case of Maud Hughes Road. But they tended to blow their whistles a lot. And it was, I mean, it was an ethereal, spooky, ephemeral kind of sound and everything. I think it's probably one of the biggest things I miss living where we are now is not having the train nearby. But it in itself made for very evocative, almost romantic kind of feel to it, when they would go by. But I could certainly see with the whistles, they're not as high pitched as like the ones in Europe. Those things just screech, really do sound like banshees on the loose. But even so, yeah, and it would tend to get foggy up there a lot, so it was a very, spooky, moody place along that, that area, so.
Well, yeah, when James was here, he talked about the book that they were writing about the screaming bridges, because it's like any urban legend, and when you're a kid, you have a lot of time, it seems like, to walk around, bridges, and you explore a lot more than you do as an adult. And so I could see where the stories would come from, and trains make all sorts of weird noises.
Oh yeah,
you're right. And if you live close to one, they just, any time of day or night, you all of a sudden hear the horn, and the squealing's the loudest thing. Like I went to UC.
Oh, the air brakes and all.
Yeah, I went to University of Cincinnati, and you could hear from, the Mill Creek Valley, the squeals at night, like
the train yard.
Yeah, whenever you were walking around, you heard those high-pitched squeals from the trains. And it does kind of have especially on a hot night when it's kind of foggy, and it has that evocative feeling that you were describing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you wrote about an experience, or kind of for our recent Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, you wrote about the Screaming Bridge.
Oh, for the new one? Yeah. I mean, I always found it fascinating, having lived close to it. And, it's one of those things I was kind of jealous that I haven't seen, swinging bodies and orbs of light, but it was still always fascinating because it was such a, like I said, a topic of conversation in the area. I mean, it would come up, people would go, oh, you live near that, or even within our neighborhood, because we had a lot of kids. At that time, our kids were, all like 12 to 4 years old. And in fact, my 7-year-old daughter went down to the creek that kind of goes along there, and she and her friend managed to walk like 1 mile up to the next road, and someone called us and goes, do you know where your 7 or 8-year-old daughter is? I said, well, I thought she was here. So certainly, because of the spooky elements, I think the people probably there tended to lean a little more towards the potential satanic rituals and things, and having their kids snatched up and eviscerated and that kind of thing, rather than the more lurid, hangings and things. I think they were more worried about them stumbling into something, nasty that would happen. But it was always, kind of a little bubbling under the surface, and would a couple times a year the topic would come up. So that's why, when we were doing this, I'd originally, because of the fact I do a lot of science art and things, I was kind of leaning towards the Serpent Mound, because I mean, it has its own fascinating history of cars dying, and the fact that it was made by a meteor impact. Is in the middle of a crater from 230 million years ago. I mean, it's like the 8th largest crater in the United States, is in southern Ohio, of all things. But having this nearby, it just just a lot of the lurid images was, well, it's just way too appealing.
Just like Satan's Hollow.
Yes,
exactly. So
well, and then the ubiquitous quality of all of these urban legends. After we did Satan's Hollow, after doing a little research, New Jersey has an even bigger drain system that's got urban legends about satanic cults and stuff. And so,
sure.
Everywhere, every legend you find. How many screaming bridges did James say there were? At least 50 in Ohio.
Yeah. You can look at his Crybaby Bridge and Screaming Bridge list, and I think I know it's in our sources list for this episode. And yeah, there's easily 50, and they're all over the state, but a lot around Cleveland and Cuyahoga, and then a few down here. So yeah, it's and I always love hearing what the locals who are living near the area that the urban legend takes place at what their thoughts are on it. I mean, I read a few comments in newspaper article comment sections, basically, and you take that as you want. But some locals would pipe up and say, yeah, it's really annoying when people park in our driveways and then go walk down the bridge and there's nothing there. So I like having that insight, though, into an urban legend, because we usually get caught up on all the fantastical things and forget people live there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And are quite rude. That's a problem with Satan's Hollow as well. People get very angry when you block their driveway to go.
Yeah.
And to get to it, you have to go through private property as well. So
I do have a question, Tom. When you lived there, and you were talking about the satanic rituals, were you living there in the 80s and 90s?
We weren't there till we didn't move there till like 92. And so a lot of the satanic panic was kind of over by that time. But I think that there was still, because of the high school nearby, there was sort of, that's, I think, parental teen angst of, somebody kind of almost doing more of a copycat. Not that there were actual satanic rituals, but somebody copying the idea of the buzz in the air about satanic rituals.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a satanic domino effect.
It is.
Of somebody wanting to do something to go, hey, what if we did this? So people would think it, type thing. So like I said, that was probably the biggest concern to people in the area, because we weren't close enough that that people were parking and walking all the way there or something. But there was, like I said, that undercurrent of concern of kids, because it was very walkable from our house.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Jen, I think I cut you off.
No, can you hear me? Okay, you guys keep freezing.
You kind of freeze every once in a while.
Okay. I'm pretty sure when we were at Satan's Hollow, I got sick from the heat, so I had to sit down, and Katie was with us. She was kind enough to come back with a car and pick me up. But while I was sitting there waiting and trying to not die of heat stroke, there was a guy across the street. I think he was filming me just to make sure I wasn't doing anything. I'm like, dude, I'm just sitting here. I have a right to sit on a curb. You don't own the street.
to be a fly on their next door bulletin board.
Oh man,
there's some people walking around.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I understand. I get pissy when people are around my house. Yeah.
Well, think about when we were at the dollhouse graves, we had the caretaker come and question us as to why we were there. And then that ended up becoming history walk through the cemetery. But
he was quite happy to tell us about everything there.
Yeah,
he was really nice. I liked him.
Well, when you're on stuff like that, some people are somewhat disrespectful and stuff, so you can understand why they were.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. By the way, when you were, I watched the video. I watched the video with Kevin Necessary prior to this. And, you were talking about weird synchronicities and things like that, where he was watching the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And, he sort of like was able to tune into the TV guide ether and find out what was going to happen. I had a weird thing happen the other day, and this definitely falls under not earth shaking or anything, but just really weird. Ages ago, I'm showing my age here, but there was a fun movie that came out like in the early 80s called High Road to China with Tom Selleck and Bess Armstrong. And it was just directed by a guy did Where Eagles Dare, great adventure going to China and all these exotic locales, 1930s, Indiana Jones kind of a thing. And I thought about, seeing if I could find the movie sometime, because I remember really enjoying it. So grounding this, I'm cleaning our basement the other day which was just a hellhole in itself. If you wanted hell on earth, well, my basement was close to it. There was definitely a whiff of brimstone. So I'm listening. I got my iPad playing music, and they're playing some music. I thought, oh, I like that, and I can recognize a lot of film composers because I really like film scores. And it sounded very John Barry-like, who did James Bond movies and Zulu and things like that. So I go over to the my iPad to see what's playing, and that's what was playing was the score to High Road to China. But
Wow.
the weird part was I was cleaning my basement. That's what was in my hand.
Wow, that's
was
spooky.
The videotape that I didn't even know that I owned, that I found on the shelf, and I picked it up just as that played on there, and I walked over with that in my hand. So, I said minor, but it still was like, well, that's pretty weird.
That's
the
delightfully
synchronicity
spooky.
gods were working overtime on that one, so we're just
So did you watch it
today? I don't have a VHS player. It's a VHS tape. So I was actually thinking of going, because I actually still have a lot of VHS tapes of some movies like Freaked and things that are just not available anymore. Going to like a Goodwill store and see if I can just pick up a VHS
Actually,
player.
VHS has become super like collectible lately because so many people have gotten rid of their VHS tapes and stuff. So
I got boxes and boxes still.
Yeah, we got rid of ours a couple of years ago, and we're terrible about we have a huge DVD collection, and we never ever watch them because we just I'll stream something really bad on YouTube, like a bad copy of it, before I'll dig my DVD out. I know that sounds terrible, but it's just one of those things. And we should. I used to love to listen to DVD commentaries and stuff, and I just never do anymore. Podcasts have usurped that bit of learning about that movie trivia and that sort of thing. So your video might be worth something. Maybe if you put it on eBay, maybe Goodwill's not the place to put it on eBay.
Oh, well, no, I wasn't Goodwill. I was going to go to Goodwill, see if I could find a VHS player.
Yeah.
To
find the player.
You know what? I just saw one at a garage sale like a month ago.
Did you?
They were selling all of their old videotapes and a VCR.
So bringing us back to the bridge.
Yeah.
Sorry. Off of the tangent we're climbing up towards. So I did want to actually note a few things for our listeners about the bridge. One, there are a lot of accidents that have happened on this bridge. So I was going through the archives, just looking up accidents for the train line and also the accidents for along the road. And there are so many, I cannot report on all of them. And the S curves are largely to be at fault. I know I did dig up some from the Union Liberty Junior Journal newspaper, but also looking on Google Earth, you can look at the bridge, the brand new one, and it has these very high black side fencing along the side of the bridge. So now you're no longer able to just jump or fall from the side of the bridge because they've put up a lot of safety fencing, which is good because that's a live train line. And also remember, everyone, don't go on live train lines. That's how you die.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's I don't know how many stories about ghost hunters or people enthused in urban legend exploring, we call it legend tripping, that will go onto these live lines and not be able to get off of them in time and get hit by trains.
Whoa.
Oh, sure.
That has happened a few times in the past decade.
So even when I haunting the line,
you become part of the tale in a way you did not expect. This happened in a local place in Rhode Island when I lived there. I happened to be outside. I could hear the train whistling, and there was a very quick boop sound, and it had been a teenage girl. So
you actually heard it.
It was a very fast pop sound because that's what you will do on one of these engines. You will just explode into a pile of flesh. And they were finding pieces of her along the route. This is ironically the second train death I've actually been around. So
that's interesting.
I am not laughing at finding this funny. That was a nervous laughter of me realizing I've been around a lot of train death. But yeah, so that's why I put my little caveat here of don't go visit this place. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tom,
Yes.
so you have a story. Really quickly, can you tell our listeners like a really quick synopsis of your submission to this year's Cabinet of Curiosities?
Yeah. I just went through and found some of the highlights. Kat pretty much covered most of them on there. I was fascinated by. Well, I mean, this is the there's the sketch
Ooh.
for the intro, the exploding and the two engineers scalded to death.
Yeah.
So kind of hitting the highlights. So it was going to start off. My thread for this is that let's see, where do I have it in here? Was the the locomotive exploding? Oh yeah, and my kind of the stream through this is it says, and thus began the legend of the screaming bridge in Maud Hughes Road with death and destruction. There are many types of screams, delight, surprise, and even ecstasy. This tale has none of these. Darker forces and emotions are afoot. And then we move on to the different kind of screams. We got the woman dropping the baby, and after it says hers was a scream of misery and remorse. And then finding the hung woman, and his was a scream of loss and despair. And then the Satan's Hollow. When Satan's Hollow is already booked for a night of devilish revelries, it is said the worshippers gather under the bridge for ritualistic sacrifices and summonings. And that one was, so theirs are screams of exultation mixed with mortal terror. So it's going to have the wrapping, sort of like bringing the different type of screams that you're hearing. The ghost train and motorcycle, and these are the screams of speeding vehicles, and kind of wrapping it up with then at the end that the bridge has been updated, but that there are still reports of mysterious orbs and lights and things and that type of thing. So so it's kind of going with the scream theme, as it were. So
I like it though. That is very fitting for that bridge.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't think there's a single story here because I pretty much have the train exploding, the mother and the baby, the couple on the bridge, and Satan's Hollow. Well, not Satan's Hollow, but the ritual sacrifices and ghost trains and motorcycles, and so those are kind of the highlights.
You got everything.
So you covered actually many more. I'm sort of jealous now that I'm not doing a school bus full of people dying, horribly. So.
Yeah. I was just trying to figure out, like, how did this work? Because apparently there is a school bus stop sign, a school bus stop, sign. So when you're approaching the bridge, it warns you that there's a school bus stop ahead. And somebody just heard that urban legend about the school bus stopping on train tracks and just took off with it. So, probably not realizing that the school bus actually would not have gone across the train tracks.
Yeah, it would have been if it had gotten down to the tracks, there was already a lot of problems there, even if it didn't get hit by a train.
Yeah. The death would have occurred before the train arrived.
That would have been kind of the PAC resistance of it,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, any more questions?
Let me think of it. I'll cut this out because I had thought of a question and now I can't remember what it was.
It was about the ghost stories, car accidents,
mayhem, murder,
nuns and puppies.
So many things to choose from.
Oh my goodness. It's a Baskin Robbins 31 flavors of urban legends here.
It is.
We got something for everyone. You like satanic rituals? We got that for you. Like random women.
It seems like that
white dresses.
It works its way into so many myths and stories. I guess it's that darkness. People like the dark aspect to.
Oh sure.
And so you always kind of add the Satan thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's you always. I think the one-upmanship you were talking about that happens in urban legends and tales and that sort of thing is what makes that so prevalent.
Yeah, the thing this one's missing is the dare element to it.
Oh,
So like
yeah.
you'll have a lot of times this local cemetery will have a nefarious headstone, and kids will dare each other to go in and touch it or stay there for an hour or stay there at midnight. And we don't really see that in this case, but we do see a lot of adolescent participation at the location.
Yeah.
And some people that I was reading their accounts about the place did say that they saw a lot of animal skeletons around the base of the bridge, which brings up a point that I like to remind a lot of people who are legend tripping of the existence of foxes and how when they scream, they tend to scream like humans, and especially their kits. And what is around this train track and the bridge? Forested area. And what likes to live in forests? Foxes. So what does the fox say? Inaudible screaming that you mistake as a ghostly woman. That's what the fox says.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good thought. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're out west, it's mountain lions.
I thought of what I was gonna. I thought of the question I was gonna ask. It was more going into your art career. And you had mentioned before that you're a huge fan of Jules Verne, and that your brother actually did a translation of, was it 20,000 Leagues?
Yeah. Yep.
Have you done a lot of Jules Verne? Because I mean, talking about speculative fiction and visions.
Actually,
of what
not
the
enough. I
would
mean,
have
you
been
and I
like
were in that show. Yeah, you and I were in that show in London, and that was really fun to do because I think a lot of it was, I was glad I was kind of able to kind of help point a way for you, because everybody thinks of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or, Around the World in 80 Days, the kind of highlights of his books and things. But he had wrote so much, so that's why I was excited. Like when I found the one about the about the travels to the Antarctic and things, and you did the one of the steam elephant in India.
That was really fun to illustrate.
Yeah, I mean, there was just such a wealth of imagination of things to pull out from his work. So I would love to do more. Just have figured out a way to monetize it.
Well, and speaking of monetizing, you were also thinking of kickstarting a sketchbook. Are you still considering that?
Yeah,
because you do daily sketch.
The daily sketching workout.
And all the sort of and they're really brilliant. We'll have to post some of them here. Tom does sketches every day, and they're just really enjoyable to follow. And so
some of the highlight of logging onto social media is seeing the sketches. And yours too, Christina.
Well,
by the way, I have to show you this, by the way. This is 8.5 by 11 paper. Woo. And that's the stack of drawings of the daily sketch workout.
Oh yes.
That is a pile.
That's about 250 drawings right there.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So I have a lot to draw from, as it were. No pun intended.
A lot of editing to go on and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yep. Plus, I've been working with some friends on doing a Kickstarter of a board game too. Ooh. So that'd be kind of a fun project I'm right in the middle of now. I've already got the board designed, and I'm having some people doing some preliminary play testing for it and stuff. So it's kind of a Lovecraftian board game. So
that sounds fun.
Yeah. So everybody's been very positive about it so far, but we'll see if it could be another Exploding Kittens, but probably not.
A lot of people talk about comics and that sort of thing being Kickstarted, but really one of the biggest areas of Kickstarter is board games and card games and that sort of thing. And as a matter of fact, a friend showed me right before the show started this game on Kickstarter, and it looked pretty nice. It raised over $1 million already. So,
oh wow!
I mean, it's amazing how much people are into this sort of thing, more than like if you do a book or a comic or whatever. There's just a huge following of people that are into board games. So, and it is one of those things that's kind of hard to make if you have like a lot of pieces and that sort of thing. The manufacture of them is getting more and more complicated, trying to source all the pieces and that sort of thing. Although
Right.
yours
Yeah,
is mostly card based, isn't it?
It was going to be, but it is an actual board game. So
Mhm.
I plan on a future card version that can be played with it. But I was going to do the entire thing, but I think I've decided just to go with the basic board game first, and then once I can figure out how the card element works, then would offer that as like an upscale, or or that you could add to it if you wanted to make the game more complex and a little more cutthroat than what it already is normally. So, because the game itself is kind of, it's like an ancient game, and literally you could play it, and somebody worked out the math to it where it would never end. It doesn't have to ever end, or the average time is about 15 to 20 minutes on the other hand. So it's got a wide.
That is a very wide.
It is.
Way. I mean, obviously, that's the goal, is to have something that's playable, but yet fun and competitive, like in under an hour.
Exactly.
I could see Twitch streams of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There you go.
So when Tom comes back, he'll be telling us about his Twitch stream of his new board game.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, on that note, I think we can probably wrap it up, because that's a great place to wrap it up, and a great place for you to tell us your social media handles.
Okay. Instagram is Tomokato 1969. TOMOKATO 1969. So actually, that was a friend of mine I was telling you about that did the Samurai Cat books. The character is Tomokato Miyawara, and my wife used to always call me Tomcat, and then it kind of merged into Tomokato after our friend's experience.
That's sweet.
So, and then the website is atomicart.com. It's ATOMICART.com. And that's pretty much all I have. Well, I'm on Facebook, I guess, Thomas O. Miller on Facebook. So I think that's the only places I really do anything. So I probably should be doing more, but I can't think of what it would be. So
that sounds wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, the Hometown Haunts podcast. You can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com to submit your own personal ghost stories, urban legends, or other weird history from around your neighborhood. For Jen and Christina, good night and stay weird.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.